Torah study discussion of Parshas Tetzaveh, but I'd like to just begin by discussing Parshas Zachor, because this Shabbos we're going to read from Parshas Zachor, and Zachor comes from Kiseitze, which is Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 17 through 19. According to many commentaries, many opinions, it's a biblical obligation to read this passage because it says, remember what you did to Amalek. So therefore, according to many commentaries, it's a biblical obligation. So what I'd like to do is first read it, first read the verses, and after we read the verses, we'll read the commentary of Rashi on the verses. And after we read the commentary of Rashi on the verses, we'll look at the commentary of three commentaries, Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Baal HaTurim, and then the Dudai Ruvain. So we'll begin with Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 17 through 19. It states, Zachor eit asher asalacha Amalek. Remember what Amalek did to us. Remember what Amalek did to you. Ba'derach, when you're on the journey, b'tzeitcha miMitzrayim, when you left Egypt. It says, then asher karcha ba'derach, they came upon you on the road. Vayizanev becha and they, this word vayizanev comes from the word tail. So they basically attacked your tail, all those who are weak from you from behind. And you were weak and weary, and you did not. And he did not fear God. And it will be when God will give you respite from all your enemies, misaviv, from around you, in the land that God will give you as an inheritance. Timches zecher Amalek mitachas hashamayim. You shall wipe out the memory of Amalek from underneath the heavens. Lo tishkach. Do not forget. So first, in order to understand this, we always look at Rashi's explanation first. Let's look at what Rashi says. Remember what Amalek did to you. First of all, even before we read the Rashi, we always look at the context. The previous verses are talking about the fact that we have to be honest with our weights and measures. If you heard Dvar Torah by Benedict Roth of our yeshiva, one of the teachers in our yeshiva, he pointed out that there's a relationship between this commandment and Amalek's attack. Now maybe the lack of performance of this commandment relates to an internal attack upon us, meaning maybe Amalek is inside of us. Let's see what Rashi says. Rashi says it like this. Rashi says, Im shikarta b'midot u'mishkalot. If you were lying, if you were not honest with your weights and your measures, have a doeg migiroy ha'oyev. You need to be concerned about the wrath of the enemy. As it states, Moznei merma Toevat Hashem. Scales of deception are an abomination to God. Miksiv Basrei, Bazadon, V'yavo Kolon. So we see from here, from this verse from Proverbs, that Rashi is saying that there's a direct connection between the dishonesty in business and the attack of Amalek. That we were attacked by our enemies because we were not honest, because we were dishonest people. And so therefore, that's the reason why we were attacked. And it's based upon a specific, hold on one second. So what does the next Rashi says? The next Rashi says, Asher karcha b'derach, they came upon you on the road. Rashi says, karcha is an unusual word. They could just say that they attacked you on the road. Why does it say the Hebrew word korcha, that they came upon you? Rashi says Lashon Mikra. It's an expression of chance, meaning to say they happened upon you, which is very interesting. You might have thought that Amalek was a premeditated attack, that they were looking to go out and attack the Jewish people. But according to this approach, it wasn't premeditated. It was just a chance. They happened upon you. And maybe that's, in a certain sense, even worse, that they weren't your enemy, and yet they attacked you. We could understand an attack by our enemies, but somebody else attacking us, that's even worse. That there's this attack by this entity that really we had no beef with. And that's what Rashi seems to be saying. Lashon Mikra, that Amalek was not necessarily planning to attack. We'll see a different approach from the Baal HaTurim, but according to this approach of Rashi, was not necessarily a sworn enemy. Or alternatively, Rashi gives an alternative approach. Davar acher lashon keri v'tuma. This is an expression of korcha, comes from the word for keri. Keri is the reference to male seed, meaning to say shayim mitaman b'mishkav zachar, that Amalek was basically assaulting the Jewish people in homosexual assault upon them. So basically that was how Amalek attacked them. They sexually assaulted the males. A third approach, davar acher, lashon kor v'chom. A third approach is that korcha comes from the expression of kor, of cold and hot, meaning to say, it cooled you down, tempered you from being hot. The nations of the world were afraid to attack the Jewish people. And this one came, Amalek came and started the attack and showed others how to attack. They were the first to lead the attack. Mashoa and Bati ro sachas. This is like a hot bath. That nobody can enter into this bath. Uva ben buyal. And one wicked person came, kafatz v'yarad l'tocha, and he jumped into the bath. Even though he became wounded, hakar osa b'fnei acherim. He cooled it down before others. So let me repeat the three approaches as to what is Amalek. Why is Amalek so dangerous and worthy of our wrath? The first approach is asher korcha baderach, that the Amalek was not actually the enemy. It was a mikra, it was an accidental attack, meaning to say they happened upon you. It was not a premeditated attack. Second answer is that they assaulted your males sexually, and that was their sin. They basically humiliated the males sexually. And the third approach is that they cooled you down. Everybody else had been afraid to attack you before this, but now that they attacked you, everybody else felt the strength and the courage to attack you. Those are the three approaches to what does it mean they cooled you down. And then, so let's look at the next Rashi. They attacked all those who were behind you. What does that mean? Rashi says, Chasarei koach machmat chatam, that they were lacking strength on account of their sin. Remember Rashi said, why were they attacked? Because they sinned with weights and measures. So if that's the case, Rashi needs to explain Why was the cloud of glory not protecting the Jewish people? They were missing strength because of their sin. Shaya Hanan Poltan. The cloud of glory spit them out because they had sinned. And what was their sin? They were dishonest in business. Va'ata yefi ageya. The verse says, "You were tired and weary." Rashi says, "Ayef bitsama." You're tired with thirst, because it says the people were thirsty for water, and afterwards it says, "Vayavo Amalek," and afterwards it says that Amalek came. That was reference to Exodus chapter 17, verse 8. The people were thirsty for water, and then it says in the next verse that the Amalek came. V'yagea, you were weary, baderach, on the journey. V'lo yarei, who was not afraid? Amalek was not afraid. Elohim milaharalecha. Amalek was not afraid to do bad to you on account of God. So again, we've seen 4 possible explanations for Amalek. One is there's 3 plus 1. The one is that Amalek was able to attack us only because we had sinned. We had sinned with the business, and then either Amalek attacked us by chance, or Amalek attacked us that they assaulted the males, or that Amalek was so dangerous because it was the first to attack and they cooled us down. And then the verse states in verse 19, Timcha et zecher Amalek, you shall wipe out the memory of Amalek. What does this mean? Me'ish v'yad isha, from man until woman. Me'olel v'ad yonek, from baby to suckling. Mishor v'ad sef, from ox until lamb. Shelo yehei shem Amalek niskar afilu ala behema. You can't even mention an Amalekite animal to say behema zu mishel Amalek haita, to say that this Amalek, that this is Amalek. Behema zu shel Amalek haita. Now, the Lubavitcher Rebbe writes, nowadays this commandment is no longer relevant because King Sennacherib of Assyria muddled all the nations in the era of the first temple. It's therefore no longer possible to determine who is an Amalekite. And thus all non-Jews are presumed to be one of the majority of Gentiles who are not descended from Amalek. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe basically says that nowadays there's nobody who's an Amalekite anymore, and so therefore we cannot attack anybody and say that they are from Amalek. But it's, and I appreciate very much what the Lubavitcher Rebbe is saying, because the ideology of attacking and destroying Amalek is so dangerous. And when you think about just flippantly and without thought applying Amalek to whoever is the enemy of the day, it's very dangerous. Remember, Baruch Goldstein did his attack on the Muslims in the mosque while they were praying, and he did that on Shabbat Zachor. So it's very dangerous to just flippantly assign it. And so the Lubavitcher Rebbe is trying to say that nobody today has the law of Amalek. But Rabbi Soloveitchik takes a different approach. And let me read to you what Rabbi Soloveitchik says. He says, and there it says in Exodus 17, verse 16, there's a war for the Lord against Amalek from generation to generation. Maimonides writes regarding the 7 nations of Canaan, it's a positive commandment to destroy the 7 nations. As it said, you shall utterly destroy them. You shall not allow a soul to live. But, Maimonides writes, their memory has long since perished. Radbaz, in his commentary, notes that the source for Maimonides' comment, their memory has long since perished, is the statement of Rabbi Joshua in Mishnah Yadayim that Sanherib, king of Assyria, came up and intermingled all the peoples. So therefore, based upon the Mishnah from Yadayim, Rambam says, Maimonides writes, there's no more 7 nations because their memory has long since perished. But, says Rabbi Soloveitchik, it is striking that in setting forth the commandment to wipe out Amalek, Maimonides does not add that phrase, their memory has long since perished. So Maimonides states in his Laws of Kings, it's a positive commandment to destroy the remembrance of Amalek. As it is said, obliterate the remembrance of Amalek from beneath the heavens. It's also a positive commandment to remember always his evil deeds and the waylaying he resorted to, so that we keep afresh the hatred manifested by him. As it says, remember what Amalek did to you. It would appear from Maimonides' statement that Amalek is still in existence while the 7 nations have descended into the abyss of oblivion. So let me just summarize. I don't want people to get lost. There's a commandment in the Torah to wipe out Amalek. The Lubavitcher Rebbe writes, it's not applicable anymore because the nations are mixed up. And we don't know who Amalek is. Rabbi Soloveitchik says, wait, not so fast. Maimonides tells us when it comes to the obligation to destroy out the 7 nations, says there's no such thing as the 7 nations anymore. We don't know who they are. But when it comes to Amalek, Maimonides does not add that phrase. Maimonides says that you have to remember what Amalek did to you. He doesn't say that. Why didn't Maimonides apply, asks Rabbi Soloveitchik, Rabbi Joshua's principle that Sanherib, king of Assyria, came up and intermingled all the peoples to Amalek, just like he did to the 7 nations? The answer to this question is very simple, says Rabbi Soloveitchik. Scripture testifies that Amalek is still in existence, a war for the Lord against Amalek from generation to generation. It says in the verse that God will fight against Amalek. Milchama Hashem v'Amalek midor lador. It says in the verse that God will fight a war against Amalek in every generation. It's impossible that Amalek will be completely destroyed before the coming of the Messiah. It's only when the Messiah is here that Amalek will be destroyed. His name will not be whole, God's name, and God's throne will not be whole until a name of Amalek will be eradicated. So that's the case. Where is Amalek today, says Rabbi Soloveitchik? He quotes his father that any nation that conspires to destroy the Jewish people becomes Amalek according to halacha. We have been charged with 2 commandments concerning Amalek. The first is the obligation to blot out his memory. This obligation is for every person with reference to an individual Amalekite. The second is the readiness to do battle as a community against Amalek. This requirement is set forth in the verse, a war for the Lord against Amalek from generation to generation. If any people seeks to destroy us, we're commanded to do battle against it. And this battle of wars is an obligatory war. So there's 2 commandments, says Rabbi Soloveitchik. There's an individual commandment to wipe out individual Amalekites, but that's only if you know who they are. We don't know who they are, but there's an obligation to wage a communal war against the people Amalek, and that applies to whoever is trying to destroy the Jewish people in that generation. That's what Rabbi Soloveitchik writes, but I would say that today it's very, very dangerous when there are people who are taking the law into their own hands and attacking innocent people. Then in the name of God, in the name of the Jewish people, then we have to say that we have to be very, very careful in how we teach this statement of Rabbi Soloveitchik. And really, I suggest emphasizing the comments of Lubavitcher Rebbe that we don't know who Amalek is anymore nowadays. So if anybody has any questions, I'll pause for a moment and see if anybody has any questions.